Let's join in lighting our candles. If you have your candles nearby, let's light them together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel yom tov. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. It's now my honor and pleasure to introduce to you our student, Jared Weisberg, playing the Bruch setting of Kol Nidre.
Let our speech be pure and our promises sincere. Let our spoken words, every vow and every oath, be honest and well-intentioned. Let our words cause no pain, bring no harm, and never lead to shame, distrust, or fear. And if, after honest effort, we are unable to fulfill a promise, a vow, or an oath, may we be released from its obligation and forgive for our failure. Let our speech be pure and our promises sincere.
Please rise for the chanting of Kol Nidre. Kol nidre vesare v'charame v'koname v'chinuye v'kinusei u'shavut din dana udeish tebana udehacharimna v'da'asana al nafshatana miyom kippurim zeh ad yom kippurim haba aleinu letova bekul hon icharat nabehon kul hon yehon shelan shevikin shevitin betelin ubevutalin lo sheririn velo kayamin nidrana lo nidre ve'esarana lo esare u'shevuatana lo shavut. We repeat the words of Kol Nidre 3 times because there is a legal understanding that in repeating the words 3 times, it makes it firm and official. Usually when we arrive at this 3rd setting, I turn to my right, to your left, and our wonderful choir rises to join together in the choral setting, a grand setting of this beautiful text. Tonight, you're all in your homes, and I feel your voices and your souls in my heart. I hope that you will join in with me wherever you are and feel the power of the Spirit of these words on this very powerful evening that we share together. This setting this year that we are using is by the very well-known composer Louis Lewandowski. Kol nidre vesare v'charame v'koname v'chinuye v'kinusei u'shavut din dana udehish tibana udehacharimna vidasana nafshatana miyom kippurim ze an yom kippurim hambam aleinu l'tova kulhon icharad navehon kulhon yehon sharan shvikin shevitin v'telin umvutalin lo sheririn v'lo kayamin nidrana la nidre ve'esarana la esare ushevuatana la shevuot.
3 Hebrew words. In these moments of Kol Nidre, perhaps the holiest time in Jewish tradition, we gather together once more in sacred convocation, albeit via the medium of the internet, rather than within the holy and familiar surroundings of our Temple Beth Shalom sanctuary. But a congregation is more than a building, isn't it? A congregation is a community, and that means people. So whether or not we are together physically, we are nonetheless united in spirit and fellowship. It is very much in that spirit that I speak to you once more from the historic sanctuary of Congregation Beth Israel, Portland's pioneer congregation, literally. This congregation was founded in 1858 when the Oregon Trail brought intrepid pioneers across mountains and rivers, deserts and plains to a new home in the Pacific Northwest. In those days, Oregon was still just a territory, not yet a state. Jews first arrived in Portland in 1849, and within less than a decade, there were enough Jews to create and build a congregation, because that is what Jews do. They congregate. That was the same motivation in 1943 for 25 Jewish families to establish a congregation in what was then the outpost of Santa Ana, because that is what Jews do. They build communities and the institutions that nurture and sustain those communities. In the course of those 77 years since the founding of Temple Beth Shalom, our Orange County Jewish community has grown and thrived, today boasting some 34 congregations, a JCC, and a large federation with its associated agencies, now serving between 80 and 100,000 Jews. And it all began with that handful of Jews and Temple Beth Shalom. The dramatic growth and development of the Orange County Jewish community bears eloquent testimony to the vision and dedication of the pioneer founders of our congregation. It is that vision that continues today and informs the very soul of this congregational family of ours. Perhaps that is due to the fact that community building is locked into the very DNA of the Jewish people. In Hebrew, the word for community is edah, ayin, daled, he. We first encounter this word in the book of Exodus. It is cited in reference to making the month of Passover in the spring and to mark the beginning of the Exodus from Egypt. The verse reads, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aharon be'eretz Mitzrayim le'mor. Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, HaChodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim, rishon hu lachem lechodshei hashana. This month shall be for you the beginning of the months. It shall be the first of the months of the year for you. There follows instructions given to the Israelites about the first Passover, not referring to the people as Bnei Yisrael, Israelites, or children of Israel, as they were referred to in the past, but as Adat Yisrael, the community of Israel. Interestingly, Rashi, arguably the premier biblical commentator from the Middle Ages, notes that this is the first commandment given specifically to the people of Israel as a collective. Think about it. Our very commandment system, our mitzvah tradition begins not with Israelites or children of Israel, but with community. Adat Yisrael. I find it fascinating that when the Israelites received the revelation of Torah, they are referred to as Ha'am, the people. But when they are given their first command to go and do something, they are designated as an Edah, a community. Perhaps the biblical authors sensed that in order to accomplish a mission, the ragtag amalgam of people who left Egypt had to be transformed into an Edah, a community united in purpose and committed to each other. Make no mistake, the idea of Am, meaning nation or people, is central to Jews and Judaism. After all, we proclaim ourselves by declaring, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel lives. But that sobriquet does not convey the intimacy or the common bonds of mission that unite us as an Edah. Scholars tell us that the Hebrew root of Edah is actually Yud, Ayin, Daled, which also means goal or objective, and suggests the notion of coming together to act in concert. That is, joining together for common purpose. It is no coincidence that the first community institution established by those early Santa Ana Jewish pioneers was a synagogue, a temple. I believe that is because the synagogue, unique in Jewish life, is the only institution that not only serves Jews, but creates Jews. It is within the communal embrace of the synagogue where Jews gather to pray, to teach our children about their traditions and their heritage, and to celebrate our simchas and happy moments. And it is in the synagogue where we gather as well to mourn our loved ones and to find mutual support and strength when life's many challenges may seem like they are too much for us to bear alone. In other words, the congregation, as an Edah, is the place where Jews live and express their Judaism like no other institution in Jewish life. The congregation is where we experience our history and our past, and it is also where we ensure a Jewish future. Those ideas, forming as they do the vision that inspired our founders, is literally cemented into the spiritual foundations of Temple Beth Shalom. And that vision is now passed on to us. How will we enunciate that vision? How will we develop it and add our voices to that vision? And how will we pass on that vision to inspire yet another generation so that they can make it their own? But it isn't always easy to speak about vision and passing on a legacy, is it? This community has experienced more than its share of pain and turmoil since the last High Holy Days. There is no denying that the individual and communal hurts and disappointments that we have experienced as a congregation, as well as the very real problems and challenges born of the effects of the pandemic and its consequences, have impacted this Edah and perhaps have clouded the vision that is the very soul of Temple Beth Shalom. But I speak to you today because I still very much believe in that vision, and I pray that together as an Edah, a community joined in common purpose, we can give new life to that vision and be renewed and re-inspired by doing so. We saw precisely that kind of collective vision just a short time ago when fire ripped through our beloved Temple Beth Shalom. When I visited TBS months later, the despair and the sense of loss and uncertainty about the future hung in the air like the acrid scent that you could smell long after the smoke had cleared. But it did not take long for this congregation to rally together as an Edah, a community of shared purpose and vision. And we saw TBS rising phoenix-like out of the ashes. And what emerged was a building and a community renewed and revitalized and better prepared to meet the future than it was before that devastating conflagration. And yes, today our congregation faces new challenges, and the forces of despair and dissension threaten the very spiritual foundations of our Temple Beth Shalom. But I firmly believe that together, with each one of us stepping up and saying, Hineni, here I am ready to do my part. I am here for my Edah, and together voice the word Hinenu, here we are. We can rise above the problems that now beset us and emerge stronger, better, and more committed to our Edah because of the lessons that we have learned. But how do we accomplish that? In response, let me offer another Hebrew word, one very similar to Edah. It is the word Ed, Ayin Daled, and it means witness. On this most holy day of Yom Kippur, in our afternoon Torah portion, we will read from the book of Leviticus, from what is called the Holiness Code. It begins, Vaydeber Adonai el Moshe lemor. And Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael, va'amarta alehem, kedoshim tihiu, ki kadosh ani, Adonai Elohechem. Speak to all the community of Israel, and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, Adonai, your God, am holy. This means that we as a community and as individuals are called to sacred purpose. We are charged to act in ways that sanctify God, not to act as if we are gods, but to act in godly ways. Every day, but especially on this Yom Kippur day, we are challenged to examine our lives and to search our actions. In doing so, we discover that we are not perfect, nor are we meant to be. But nonetheless, we strive to live our lives so that our journey on this earth is a sacred one, filled with meaning, filled with purpose. In doing so, our lives are uplifted as a sanctification of God. The prophet Isaiah proclaimed, Atem edai ne'um Adonai, v'avdi asher bacharti. You are my witnesses, declares Adonai, my servant whom I have chosen. We are God's witnesses. That means that we bear witness to God's presence in the world. The Midrash dilates upon this idea, stating, when you are my witnesses, I am God. But if you are not my witnesses, I'm not God. Think about that. What a revolutionary and mind-boggling statement that is. When we, through our lives, bear witness to God's presence in our world, then God exists. But if we turn our backs on the sanctity of our lives, then God is not God. When we, as individuals and as a community, strive to be holy, that is, to be the kinds of people and the kind of community that God would want us to be, then we affirm God's presence in the world. Now, I realize that it might be very difficult for some of us to believe in God in our present day, when circumstances in our world seem so threatening, and when our modern sensibilities about the nature of faith and religion challenge our belief in God, a divine being, our tradition tells us this: stop being concerned about whether or not you recognize God. Instead, concern yourself with living the kind of life so that God will recognize you. We should all ask ourselves today, right now, would God recognize me? Do my actions, my relationships, my values, my aspirations, do they affirm God's presence in the world, or do they deny God? I truly believe that such self-scrutiny holds great validity and power, even if you do not hold a traditional view of God, or for that matter, any belief in God whatsoever. When we strive to bear witness to God's presence in the world, we validate our age-old faith and traditions. These values echo in and through us each time we recite the most sacred words in our tradition, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. This, of course, is followed by the words of the Ve'ahavta. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. These words are so familiar, aren't they? But if you stop to think about what they mean, what they really mean, loving God is not about emotion. It is about action. Loving God with all your heart means taking all your intelligence, your skills, your talents, your training, those parts of us that come from the heart according to our ancient forebearers, taking all those that make us who we are, what we are in our skills, and using them to show that you love God. On one level, I suppose we could say that it is in our professional lives and in our business dealings, how we act, that we seek to elevate what we do. But it is even more than that. Today we see countless health professionals, first responders, service providers, and workers of all kinds who are called upon to put faith and the common good above self-interest and personal gain. There are many such heroes. On a grand scale, there's someone like Dr. Anthony Fauci, who has emerged as the voice of science and reason, providing so many of us with a strong anchor in this pandemic storm. I think, too, of Captain Brett Crozier, who sounded the alarm about an outbreak of COVID-19 aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt. He chose to jeopardize his career rather than expose the crew under his command to unwarranted risks, and he suffered the consequences for his actions, while unjustified by Navy regulations, certainly justified by his moral conscience and convictions. But there are many others, unheralded perhaps, quiet and unassuming heroes, just trying to do the right thing. A man in Detroit gave $900 from his meager savings to provide gasoline for nurses working to save lives. He thought that if he couldn't save lives personally, the heroic thing to do was to support the people who do risk themselves to save lives. Since so many small businesses have shut down or drastically curtailed their operations, a woman in Gig Harbor, Washington, started a gift card giveaway where she would have people donate money, and she used that money to buy gift cards at designated small businesses. To date, she's raised over $20,000 for small businesses in her community. The business chosen each received sometimes a modest amount, $500, $2,000, but a real help for them in these difficult times. Then there's a man named Thomas from Fredericksburg, Virginia. When the coronavirus was at its worst in New York, he helped to save lives over 300 miles to the north by volunteering to serve as an EMT in Queens, one of the hardest hit districts during this global pandemic. Working through Virginia-based Life Care Medical Transport, Thomas and his team deployed to New York with 8 ambulances and 16 fellow EMTs. He chose to help when he could have stayed at home right there in Virginia. I'm sure that each of us have our own heroes who live in our hearts as God's witnesses. The first that come to my mind are my sister and sister-in-law, Gabby and Pam, both of whom are clinical social workers here in Portland. Since the advent of the pandemic, they have put in extra long hours, day in and day out, facing exhaustion and the emotional draining that comes with bringing a measure of calm and balance to the lives of their clients, many of whom are on the front lines in this fight against the coronavirus. And there are more, so many, many more examples. I ask you now, take a moment. Think about who it is that you would choose from your own life or from the world out there. Who would you choose to be your candidates as exemplars of those bearing witness to God's presence in the world and in their hearts? I pray that when this present crisis has passed, we do not forget that kind of dedication, because it is an eloquent testament to God's presence in the world. It is holy work, and I truly believe that everyone who steps up and says, "Hineni, here I am, how can I help?" bears witness to God's existence, thereby sanctifying their own lives. We as a community, an Eidah, are called to be witnesses, Eidim, and join together, as I said, in common purpose and vision for ourselves, for our community, and for future generations. And that brings me to the third word that I'd like to focus on this Yom Kippur, from those same letters that we spoke of before, Ayin and Daled. This time, we have the word Ad, meaning perpetuity or the future. This word is about our legacy, what we leave for the future. Rabbi Al Vorspan of blessed memory, one of the architects of our Reform Movement's programs to promote Tikkun Olam, repair of the world, wrote something in his book, Jewish Values and Social Crisis, that speaks to me most profoundly today. This is what he wrote. What is the legacy I can leave my own children? It is not stocks and bonds and notes and precious stones. It is not even such wisdom as I may have accumulated in my life. For what is man and what is his life? I have lived and I will die, but the deepest mysteries of life will no doubt be as unclear to me at the end as at the beginning. Each of us is but a puff of smoke in eternity. What is immortal about us is that we are part of an undying Jewish people. The wisdom which has been distilled in 3,000 years of unique history is the greatest legacy that a Jew can leave his children. For it is not economic wealth, but moral and spiritual treasure which I can pass on to my children, as did my ancestors through 112 generations, stretching back to the midst of Sinai. What I owe them is a chance to grasp a faith to live by. In a very real sense, that is why we're here today, isn't it? We are seeking a sense of belonging by being part of an Eidah. We are striving for a sense of purpose and meaningful direction in our lives that comes from each of us seeing ourselves as an Eid, a witness, bearing witness to God's presence in the world. And we so fervently hope that we can leave a lasting legacy, la'ad, far into the future. Eidah, Eid, and Ad, three Hebrew words that can guide us to a real sense and meaning and purpose in our lives as individuals and together as a congregation. On this evening of Kol Nidre vows, I ask you, my dear friends, to join me in taking this vow. Hineni, here I am, so that together we can build a better future. We must not fall into despair, nor can we leave this sacred task up to someone else. Each of us must take our part, and in so doing, may we be inscribed in the book of life with signatures of blessing. Gemar Chatima Tova, Ken Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Day and night are yours, creative spirit of the universe, the muted colors of twilight, the radiance of dawn. Yours are the spreading wings of light, the deepening shadows of darkness, an ever-changing drama. In the human heart, too, the struggle between darkness and light unfolds. From sunlit heights of generosity, that human heart sinks to the gloomy depths of selfishness. Although we fall, you give us strength to rise again. You call on those who hurt through word or deed to break free from wrongdoing and return to you. All who hear your call to goodness are embraced. All who reject emptiness and evil find acceptance from you. We come into your presence this night of Kol Nidre, aware that our shortcomings and weaknesses are many. Yet, encouraged by your promise of forgiveness, we choose freely the path of repentance, restoring wholeness to our lives and holiness to the world. Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim. Blessed are you, Adonai, creator of twilight and dusk.
We join together in chanting the Shema, and on Yom Kippur we sing the Shema line and the Baruch Shem Kivod line at full volume, as is our tradition. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Please be seated as we join together in the chanting of Ve'ahavta. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadivarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha v'aderech u'v'shochbecha u'v'kumecha u'kshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'v'hisharecha Leman tiskeru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'hitem kidoshim le'Elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihiot lachem le'Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem emet.
At the beginning of creation, God spoke, and primordial light infused all existence, contained in radiant vessels. An intention arose in the mind of God to create a being capable of choice, able to distinguish good from bad, holy from profane. God breathed in, Tzimtzum, and for the smallest moment was absent, to make space for human beings to develop their godly essence, as expressed in the divine intention, let us make the human being according to our image. Utter darkness reigned. The forces of chaos tore at the cosmos. The vessels were broken. All creation threatened to fall asunder. At that instant, when darkness was complete and creation was in peril, the human being came into existence. And God breathed out again, filling the universe once more with splendor. But what of the rays of light that escaped from the broken vessels? Were they lost forever? Now the fusion of divine intention and human potential became clear, for human beings are able, and thus commanded, to retrieve the wandering rays of light, those entangled in darkness, lost in unlikely corners of the universe. Each act of kindness, each effort to be human in inhuman circumstances, returns a spark of light to its source. The rays of light are everywhere, and when all have been retrieved and uplifted, the messianic time of peace will be upon us.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'ha'amideinu shomreinu l'chaim uferos aleinu Sukkot shlomecha v'takenenu b'eitza tova milfanecha v'hoshienu leman shemecha v'hagen badeinu v'hasem aleinu oyev dever mecherev v'rav yagon והסר שטן מלפנינו, והסר שטן מלפנינו ומאחרינו, ובצל כנפיך תסתירנו, כי אל שומרנו ומצילנו אתה, כי אל מלך חנון, מלך חנון, מלך חנון ורחום אתה.
Tefillah is a journey from the God of the ancients to my rock and my redeemer. On most nights you stand on the holy summit of Tefillah and see before you a land that calls out for redemption, for healing, for peace, a world that needs you. Kol Nidre is different. Tefillah tonight is an inward journey that takes you deep within yourself, pierces you to the core. You stand on the holy summit of this Tefillah and see before you the land within, a weary soul yearning to be forgiven, longing to be loved. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Vezrat Sarah.
We take these next few moments for our own silent thoughts and meditations. בספר חיים, ברכה ושלום, ופרנסה טובה. בספר חיים, ברכה ושלום, ופרנסה טובה. ניזכר וניכתב לפניך, ניזכר וניכתב לפניך. אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל, אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל, לחיים טובים ושלום, לחיים טובים ושלום. We rise as we join in the words of Tavo Lifanecha. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu, tavo lefanecha, ואל תתעלם בתחינתנו, שאין אנחנו הזייפנים וקשי עורף לומר לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, צדיקים אנחנו ולא חטאנו, אבל אנחנו חטאנו, אבינו פשענו. We join in the words of our vidui, of our Ashamnu. Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 Ashamnu, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu Dofi, Dibarnu Dofi, He'evinu, He'evinu, V'hirshanu, V'hirshanu, Zadnu, Zadnu, Chamasnu, Chamasnu, Tafalnu Shaker, Tafalnu Shaker, Yatznu Ra, Yatznu Ra, Kizavnu, Kizavnu, Latznu, Latznu, Maradnu, Maradnu, Niatznu, Niatznu, Sararnu, Sararnu, Avinu, Avinu, Pashanu, Pashanu, Saranu, Saranu, Kishinu Oref, Kishinu Oref, Rashanu, Rashanu, Shichatnu, Shichatnu, Tiavnu, Tiavnu, Tahinu, Tahinu, Titanu, Titanu.
When I was young and learned the alphabet, life was open to me. A was full of aspiration, B was for beauty, C for confidence, and D for dreams, and so on through the list. No fewer than 26 opportunities, 26 possibilities. And yet I fear that with the passage of time, I've squandered them, created instead A's of apathy, B's of brusqueness, C's of coarseness. Help me then to return to that innocence. Let the letters be letters once again, and let them rise to the heavens and form into the words that you know I wish to say.
We read responsively in the Hebrew and the English of our Al-Chet Shechatanu. Al-Chet Shechatanu lefanecha bizadon uvishgaga, ve'al-Chet Shechatanu lefanecha b'dibur peh. The ways we have wronged you deliberately and by mistake, and harm we have caused in your world through the words of our mouths. Al-Chet Shechatanu lefanecha be'imutz halev, ve'al-Chet Shechatanu lefanecha b'tifshut peh. the ways we have wronged you by hardening our hearts, and harm we have caused in your world through careless speech. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bechachash uvchazav, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha birchilut. The ways we have wronged you through lies and deceit, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bif lilut, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha bizilzu horim umorim. The ways we have wronged you by judging others unfairly, and harm we have caused in your world through disrespect to parents and teachers. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'vidui peh, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'honaat re'ah. The ways we have wronged you through insincere apologies, and harm we have caused in your world by mistreating a friend or neighbor. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chozek yad, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'masa uvmatan. The ways we have wronged you through violence and abuse, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business. Ve'al kulam eloah slichot selach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu. For all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, and lead us to atonement. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bagalui uvasater, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha bifrikat ol. The ways we have wronged you openly and secretly, and harm we have caused in your world by losing self-control. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'gilui arayot, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'ma'achal uv'mishteh. The ways we have wronged you through sexual immorality, and harm we have caused in your world through consumption of food and drink. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'yetzer hara, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'neshech uv'marbit. The ways we have wronged you by giving into our hostile impulses, and harm we have caused in your world through greed and exploitation. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bilatzon, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha bin tiat garon. The ways we have wronged you through cynicism and scorn, and harm we have caused in your world through arrogant behavior. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'sinat chinam, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tum'at sifatayim. The ways we have wronged you by hating without cause, and harm we have caused in your world through offensive speech. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bilshon hara, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tzarut ayin. The ways we have wronged you with a slanderous tongue, and harm we have caused in your world through a selfish or petty spirit. Ve'al kulam eloah slichot, selach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu. For all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement.
We wrong you when we wrong ourselves for our failures of integrity. Adonai, we seek forgiveness for passing judgment without knowledge of the facts, and for distorting facts to suit our purposes, for succumbing in silence to social pressure, and for acquiescing in beliefs we find offensive, for using others' bad behavior to excuse our own, and for blaming others for our mistakes and poor decisions, for pretending to emotions we do not feel, and for appearing to be other than what we are, for condemning in our children the faults we tolerate in ourselves, and for tolerating in ourselves the faults we condemn in our parents. We dishonor you when we dishonor our society. For our failures of justice, Adonai, we seek forgiveness. For being indifferent to deprivation and hunger, while accepting a culture of self-indulgence and greed. For abuse of power in boardrooms, courtrooms, and classrooms, and for accepting the neglect of children and elders, the ill and the weak, for permitting social inequalities to prevail, and for lacking the vision to transcend our selfishness, for glorifying violence and turning hastily into war, and for allowing history to repeat itself, for behaviors that risk the future of our planet, and for wreaking havoc on our only true inheritance, God's creation.
God, our creator and guide, let us speak now of healing acts by which we bring you into the world, the acts of repair that make you a living presence in our lives.
Al hatikun shetikanu lefanecha. For the act of healing we have done openly or anonymously. For the act of repair we have done without personal gain. Al hatikun shekitanu lefanecha.
For the act of healing we have done by seeking forgiveness. And for the act of repair we have done by forgiving others.
Al hakatun shekinu lefanecha. For the act of healing we have done through righteous giving, and for the act of repair we have done by opening our hearts. Al hatikun shekitanu lefanecha.
For the act of healing we have done by comforting the mourner and visiting the sick. And for the act of repair we have done by pursuing justice and human rights, fairness and civility.
Al hatikun shekitanu lefanecha. For the act of healing we have done by making peace between ourselves and another. And for the act of repair we have done protecting nature and all its creatures. Al hakitun shekitanu lefanecha.
For the act of healing we have done by teaching our children the ways of peace. And for the act of repair we have done by teaching our children the ways of Torah.
Al hakitun shetikanu lefanecha. For the act of healing we have done by honoring elders and loving the stranger. For the act of repair we have done in response to our commandment. Choose life and blessing. V'yal kulam.
Bring nearer the day when you shall be one and your name shall be one.
I share with you now these beautiful words of this piyut, this special poem only found in the Yom Kippur evening liturgy. This is Ya'aleh, set by the remarkable composer Max Janowski. Ya'aleh, Ya'aleh, Tachanuneinu me'erev, V'yavo shavateinu miboker, V'yira'eh rinunenu ad arev. Ya'aleh, Ya'aleh, koleinu me'erev. V'yavot tzidkatenu miboker, v'yira'eh pidyonenu ad arev. Ya'aleh, Ya'aleh, inuyenu me'erev, V'yavo, v'yavo, slichatenu miboker, v'yira'eh nakatenu ad arev, v'yira'eh, v'yira'eh nakatenu ad arev. Ya'aleh menuseinu me'erev, v'yavo lema'ano miboker, v'yira'eh kippureinu ad arev. Ya'aleh, Ya'aleh, yishenu me'erev, v'yavo, tohoreinu miboker, v'yira'eh chinunenu ad arev, v'yira'eh chinunenu ad arev.
Will you hear my voice, you who are far from me? Will you hear my voice wherever you are? A voice calling aloud, a voice silently weeping, endlessly demanding a blessing. The busy world is vast, its ways are many. Paths meet for a moment, then part forever. We go on searching, but our feet stumble. We cannot find that which we have lost. Perhaps my last day is already drawing near. Drawing close are the tears of parting. I will wait for you till my days flicker out, like Rachel waiting for her beloved.
Shema koleinu, Adonai Eloheinu, Hu sevirachem aleinu, aleinu, v'kabel birachamim, birachamim, uv'ratzon, et tefillatenu. Hashivenu Adonai elecha, Hashivenu elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh yameinu, yameinu kikedem. Tashlichenu. Tashlichenu. Leit zikna kichlot kolcheinu. Al tazveinu. Shema koleinu, Adonai Eloheinu, Hu sevirachem aleinu, aleinu, v'kabel birachamim, birachamim, uv'ratzon, et tefillatenu. We join in these beautiful words, Ki anu amecha. Ki anu amecha ואתה מלכנו, אנו בניך ואתה אבינו. אנו נחלתך ואתה גורלנו. אנו צאנך ואתה נוטרנו. אנו כרמך ואתה נוטרנו. אנו רעייתך ואתה דודנו.
This holy night concludes with memory. Our last thoughts always are those we have lost. We miss them especially tonight, yearning for their presence at our side. The service we have shared once was theirs. They spoke and sang the ancient words. They prayed, repented, and yearned for better lives, as we have done. Flawed in their deeds, imperfect in their faith, they still drew strength from their traditions as we seek fortitude in ours. What was good and beautiful in their lives once gave us joy and now inspires us each higher. The knowledge that they loved us deeply brings comfort to our hearts. They see light candles of remembrance and gratitude. And we speak this timeless truth. Zikronam livracha. Their memory is a blessing, now and forever. We pray that their goodness will live in our lives, planting seeds of kindness and hope for generations to come.
We join together in our closing song, Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom, Shalom bimromav, Hu yaseh Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Oseh Shalom, Shalom bimromav, Hu yaseh Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Hu yaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, amen. Oseh Shalom, Shalom bimromav, Hu yaseh Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Ve'al kol Yisrael, amen. Gemar Chatima Tova.